Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Stephen King's book The Shining is widely regarded by many as a classic, both film critics and horror movie fans alike. Regarded by some as King's greatest work, a lot of hardcore fans of the book were left confused. Stanley Kubrick is a man who has an insane attention to detail, sometimes requiring the actors to record over 100 takes just to get a shot. Kubrick would spend years making a film, researching every aspect about the location and the area. Each film to Kubrick was not a product to make money, but its own individual artistic venture. This left some fans confused at why Kubrick made such vast changes to King's original work, such as making Jack Torrance such an unlikable protagonist and completely rewriting the book's ending. Why would someone who took such care into adapting a book like A Clockwork Orange make such a strange change now? There must be some underlying reason. Film interpretation, or interpretation of art in general, can be a tricky subject. The meaning that we derive from a work may never be intended by the author, but at the same time, that does not mean it doesn't represent those things. The film The Shining is no stranger to theories. There is a full-length movie called Room 237 that explores them, even insinuating that The Shining itself is an apology for the real-life conspiracy of faking the moon landing. What we're going to be talking about today is a much more plausible theory. A theory that Kubrick used the story of The Shining as a shell to tell a second narrative in the background about the atrocities the United States government committed against Native Americans. Throughout King's book, the Overlook Hotel has zero mention of any Native American art hanging up in any part of the hotel. Why would Kubrick add this detail? Yes, it could be a choice made by the art director, but most people are aware of Kubrick's extreme attention to detail. Although this is not the only mention of Native Americans, we are then introduced to the fact that this hotel was built on top of a Native American burial ground. As horror cliche and Stephen King-like as it sounds, it actually makes no appearance in King's original book. Another oddity in the film happens when Jack is at the bar having a drink with Mr. Grady. What is interesting to me is that Jack utters the phrase "white man's burden."
White man's burden, white man's burden.
The White Man's Burden was a book written by Cecil Rhodes in the 1800s about how all the races but white are inferior, and it is up to the white man to tame or to deal with them. This incredibly racist undertone always kind of felt out of place to me, but looking at The Shining as a weird allegory for America's race relations portrays it in a new light. With the white man's burden being mentioned, isn't it a bit ironic that the only employee we get to know at the hotel is the black chef, Doc? Another thing from The Shining that has confused a lot of people is the scene where blood comes pouring out of the elevator. A lot of people ask, why is that? Why is there blood out of the elevator? Whose blood is it? Ironically, Kubrick already set that one up. Whose blood is beneath the Overlook Hotel? Well, of course, the dead Native Americans the hotel was built on top of. Another great example of Native American symbolism is the can of Calumet, a brand of canned food. The head of a Native American chief, is turned to its side in every shot. If we examine the character of Jack, we see that he was changed from a likable, tragic character in King's original book to a more unlikable, brooding abuser. Why? Well, it's clear to me that Jack Torrance is a representation of old racist mindsets. He is an abuser. He is violent. He has a strong suspicion of Doc because he is black, and later ends up murdering him. Jack Torrance is the physical embodiment of the white man's burden, and in this film, Kubrick is attempting to show how toxic that mindset really is. Kubrick used Stephen King's story of The Shining as a front for his own second narrative. If you start thinking about the Overlook Hotel and the site where it stands as America, it all seems to make sense. The hotel was built on the blood of Native Americans, kept working by the people of color in the kitchen so that they could all serve the white man. Kubrick used The Shining as a platform to portray the atrocities that the United States government committed. It's strange to think how recently these atrocities were committed. Between the years of 1973 and 1976, the United States government sterilized 3,406 Native American women against their will. That is 3 years before The Shining came out. The government was still treating Native Americans as subhumans. Throughout American history, Native Americans have been almost erased. The people of this country seem to have a mindset of out of sight, out of mind. What is a more fitting way to portray the struggle of Native Americans than in the background of a film about white people? The meaning that we can derive from a work may never be intended by the author, but at the same time, that does not mean it doesn't represent those things. Whether or not Kubrick meant for The Shining to be an allegory for the struggle of Native Americans is irrelevant. The message and symbolism in this film will always be there. You can always derive that meaning out of the film, whether intended or not. This, to me, makes this film truly a work of art.